trying to technical difficulties.
So with that, it is Thursday, June 25th, and what we're here today is to listen to Gordon and Adrian, and thank you both for doing that, talking about embodied AI. As you mentioned, Gordon, this is going to be with us for a very, very long time. And there's a big part of me that says I'm excited about having somebody get my beer while I watch my TV without having to get up. But I think it's a little more than just that when it comes right down to it. And I hope to hear your guys' thought. I know you spent quite a bit of time and had a lot of research done on this, and looking forward to hearing all about it. Before, maybe to get a second to maybe introduce yourself, and that way we can, that introduction will be on the video that will be posted to the website as well. So, Gordon, if you let us know a little bit about you, and then we'll go to Adrian, and then we'll kind of get rolling.
Okay. Adrian, if you want to go ahead and show the slides while I do my intro so we can get those up.
Zoho's having some trouble loading.
Okay.
So,
well, anyhow, hey, I'm Gordon Withrow. I'm a digital transformation consultant. I live in Dublin, Ohio. I've been a founding member of this board of AIFA with all these partners. Most folks here are part of our team. It's been a great journey to try and help share our understanding of things as we gain it, and it's a moving target. Yeah, I do a lot of work with helping organizations move at scale from their past to a digital future, and I've done some work in AI, and I've been studying AI futures for about 5 years, so we'll get into a lot of that today. Adrian, over to you.
I studied landscape architecture, and over the years started really getting into the technical systems, like the software that we use. So started learning how to work with some of that on the more technical side, what the data means, and I run a landscaping company around here, and so just been learning over the past couple of years, and happy to showcase it. I'm
Awesome.
trying to get the slides, should be up in 1 second if it works.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start, and just again start by saying thank you for joining Adrian and I today. We're going to tee up some awareness and some thinking about embodied AI. We all talk a lot about AI, and when we do, I think it's usually in a context of one of two contexts. It's either all AI, like it's all the same, or often it's generative AI, things like GPT and Claude and Gemini, etc. Because that's where we spend a lot of time and attention, or others do at any rate. So today we're going to look at this coming wave of AI that's really going to take an awful lot of our time and attention in the days ahead. They're really going to shape our world. If you go on to the next slide then, Adrian. And we've broken this down in a number of ways, as you're going to hear us talk through. But for simplicity today, think about embodied AI. We're going to talk about in 3 specific contexts. First, robots. Second would be the built environment or smart cities capabilities. And third, manufacturing. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on each of those 3. And when we're finished, you'll have journeyed with us to explore a lot of embodied AI through those 3 lenses, among others. If you want to go on to the next slide. So we are facing a changing world, and that brings with it an uncertainty that seems to be ever increasing. And really, since the COVID pandemic and many of the symptoms and the fallout from that period, the uncertainty quotient, I'll call it, has increased many times over in what life was like 20 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. Uncertainty's on the rise. And we know there's this future coming, and the changes that have been taking place in advancements in both AI and in robotics, they're accelerating. And I believe they're poised to change our world even further and even faster. And while we don't truly know what the world's going to look like in 10 to 15 years, as I like to say, we can take cues and have clues. I don't always rhyme, but when I do, I do pretty good. On to the next one, Adrian. I'm going to use a lot of AI illustrations just for grins. But one of the things I think about is this idea of AI is invisibly filling all of our gaps like water. So when we were getting a handle on everything, just as COVID was declining, we thought, okay, things going to return to normal or some new normal. But 4 years ago, then the world woke up to the existence of AI and the opportunities and challenges it was going to present. And as I said earlier, I've been building and implementing AI solutions as a delivery leader since 2020. So I had a little bit of a head start on all of this. And I was thinking I might retire sometime and finish my book and sort of slow down. But my experience with AI changed me. I took a new lens to view the world through, one in which the future that we might live in didn't look enough like the past or the present that I felt honored humanity. I'm seeing the potential for our collective values to be violated, really, in ways that most of us would agree on. So the risk I saw was one of sleeping through this transformation and then finding ourselves having given away more than we would have ever intended. So the primary lens that most people have had on AI over the last 4 or 5 years has been this generative AI boom that started when ChatGPT launched in November 2022. And of course, as you all know, by the end of the year, millions of people have been exposed to these opportunities and possibilities. And then, since then, the Gen AI wars have raged, and you've had the entrance of Claude and Gemini and MS Copilot and Grok and all these others. But it's truly just a limited part of the AI spectrum and not the one we need to be watching, in my opinion. So somewhat quietly, while everybody's been distracted with generative AI, the largest corporations and organizations in the world are implementing other built-to-purpose narrow AI. And that is filling all the gaps in our processes, our workflows, and our decision-making on how work gets done. So it's as fluid as water, filling in all those gaps to the level it can swallow. But there's coming an even more impactful AI that could not only change our processes and systems to be more efficient, but will actually change the way we live. And we want to talk about that a little more today with embodied AI. So I'm seeing we got some slide problems, Adrian.
My computer's frozen. Would you be able to share those slides?
Well, I can try.
Yeah,
I don't have good bandwidth here, but we'll see.
I guess Google Slides is too much for my computer.
You can always send it to John and he can share it.
Yeah, that's I'm kind of limited. Yeah, if you could send it to John, or would you like me to? I mean, it's 38 if I can get it to go.
Yeah, I'm happy to show it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's take a pause here. I'll continue to speak here in just a minute, but we'll take a pause while I try to. I'll put this in the chat, John, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I'll find my my copy of the slides if I can.
We wouldn't be talking about technology without technology problems, right?
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Well, and I think as you guys are talking, I think this discussion is very, very early. It's like it's not even timely. Like we're a little ahead on this discussion because I don't think most people even realize the potential for all the things that you guys are talking about in terms of changing how we do things. The car changed the way we move between places, and I think embodied AI is going to change the way we exist in our own spaces. And I think that is going to be an amazing transformation. I jokingly talk about the, the robot getting me beer while I'm watching TV. But the reality of it is, everything we're talking about here is significantly more consequential than anything than just getting a beer from the fridge.
Yeah. Are you guys able to see a slide now that says what is embodied AI?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to not put this in presentation mode just for a minute so that I can navigate my tiny laptop in a motel in Buffalo. Uh, what is AI is what I want, or what is embodied AI? I wanted to kind of go through that. It's an AI subfield, and think of it as systems that have a body. Obviously a robot or a vehicle, whether that's a walking, crawling, flying, driving vehicle, or any kind of a physical presence. So you think about the devices that are attached all over the place in our cities, physical device. And the difference is it has a physical presence in the physical world. And so, a disembodied, if you want to go into that, would really be the stuff that's behind the glass. And it only knows what we tell it. It only knows what it only knows what it's been told. Whereas an embodied AI has a physical presence, and it's not going to experience life the way we do, but it will be able to mimic having experienced life the way we do by a visual acuity provided by cameras, an auditory capability that works its way through natural language processing into a language it can understand from our English language, and it can pitch it back to us. And also, when it has an awareness of its own being, what it is, what its capabilities are, it can use that and react in a physical world. So that's the baseline we're talking from. Here's another one. I'll give you a second to read this, and then I'll give you some thoughts about it. I'm going to zoom it way in. Can you guys see this okay?
Yeah.
I just thought this was funny. Everybody's talking about the singularity, and this sort of reminded me of the Wall-E movie. But people have defined singularity as when AI catches up to the humans and has the level of intelligence, or maybe even superior intelligence and AGI to what humans have. Well, if we're not careful, we will sleepwalk our way into a situation where we just start dumbing down what we do and how we do it to a point where it can be done by the machines, and we accept that as better than us putting out all of our energy to have a slightly better or different life. And so you would still achieve singularity that way, but we don't want to be dumbed down to the AI level. We want AI to come up to our level where it can. So anyhow, that was just for grins. Let's go back to the previously scheduled program. The for today's discussion, I want us to think about AI in an embodied sense in a number of different slices, and I'm going to start with these four. In my research, what I'm looking at is autonomous humanoid robots is one branch that is developing that we care about. The autonomous vehicles is another, and this would be on wheels, on feet, or with propellers. Then you've got your smart cities, your built environment, and then the special purpose robots. So think about the welders in an automobile factory. That's your baseline. But we can slice it a number of other ways. Once you get into it, for the purpose of study, what I've been doing, I've got it sliced a number of different ways. Let's just start over here at 3 o'clock. There's certainly the applications we would use AI for. And by the way, these are so small in this deal. If you guys get to a point where you can share the slides in the program, just take over. Anyhow, the applications, everything from caregiving to personal assistance to transportation, all these different ways we might use embodied AI. That's an avenue to research. Then, as I've talked a lot, there are about 3 entities in the world that are the sources of regulation standards and legal compliance. They tend to be the EU, the UK, and the US. China, of course, will have their own standards and regs, but they tend to be lighter because they want total openness to the use of their products. And then there's everybody else. So what tends to happen, just like with the internet, is if you want to play, you're going to build to be able to work against the tightest set of restrictions that are out there. And again, historically, these are coming from the UK or EU. We'll see that continue, I believe, in the AI space, and all the regs that are being published, those are the primary ones. If you move over to 9 o'clock, then we get into the mass production organizations, as I like to call them, or the manufacturers of all these devices. I've got about 6 or 7 listed here. They're the primary, and then there's the all others bucket. But I will tell you, there are over 100 companies in China that are making autonomous humanoid robots right now, and that you can buy them online. So this is happening. Finally, at 12 o'clock, you get your STEEP. Sometimes we would refer to this as a PESTLE assessment, where you look at the social, the technological, the economic, the environmental, and the political activities that are going on and ramifications of all this change. So as we talk through that, understanding what's going to happen and in what time frame it might happen leads you to go deep on some of those things. So that's another way to slice it. And then finally, as I move on, I have autonomous humanoid robots chunked up into like the core caregivers. There's special purpose robots, as we talked about. There's companion robots, there's surrogates and digital twins, and then there's just servants. And there are subdomains to each of these that go along. And I've got another slide for that somewhere. Let's see. But let's talk about the 3 horizons. This is a tool that I use in my futures work, where you're not predicting the future. You're predicting, based on the evidence, some possibilities or probabilities. And what we tend to do is we take them into the farthest reaches of possibility. So if we start here in Horizon 1, what we have today, that's Horizon 1, present tense. We have early adopters, and those are typically large corporations, organizations that are using robots in their mass production lines. So think automobile manufacturers, think electronics manufacturers who are doing highly producible, highly repeatable activities. And then you also have wealthy people who are just kind of experimenting with an autonomous humanoid. And the cost of those that they might be tinkering with is over $100,000. Some maybe $250,000. But what we're heading toward is something that's much cheaper, much less than the cost of a used car. But that's where we find ourselves today. And as I talk about the possible futures in the next couple horizons, you'll understand why. The next likely thing that might happen in the second horizon, let's say in 5 years, the extremes would be we have a slow roll where the lack of regulations and standards and the high cost associated with that lack of standards means that the companies that can produce these devices won't do it with gusto, because they know they can't just let that line roll and make 2 million copies. There's the risk of recalls, there's the risk of lawsuits, there's the risk of incompatibility. And so they would just kind of slowly drag their feet toward ever getting there. The alternative, however, would be if we took more of like a mobile phone approach, where there weren't a lot of standards. There was a standard for the, let's say, for the wavelengths with the FCC and all. But as far as what a phone did and could do, didn't do, and privacy and security, all that was just a Wild West experience. So if we don't get the standards, and yet we get enough of it that the manufacturers decide, you know what, I'm gonna make X billions of dollars selling these things. I'm gonna set aside a large percentage of it for lawsuits and rework, but it's time. I want to take market share. I want to be the leader. So that would be the alternative, is we could quickly get into what I called robot chaos, where everybody's making robots they're not all the same. We've got VHS and we got beta, but the idea the economy is going to drive it. The demand will be there because they're available. So then finally, as we work our way out, maybe 10, 15 years, I see a couple of possibilities related to availability and price. And one would be the happy path would be you've got what we call a united adoption, where the conditions for the folks making these devices and the expectations of governments and organizations are such that we can make them pretty much the same and the same usefulness everywhere. And for that, I would have you think about like a car or a mobile phone, a smartphone. While those are different in each country, Ford Motor Company, for example, is going to make cars all around the world, sell them all over the world. Yeah, they've got to deal with emissions packages in California. They have to deal with left-hand, right-hand drive. You want to sell a car in Bermuda, you got to have a very short bumper because they can only be so long. But for the most part, it's mass production and it's global. With our smartphones, really about the only thing that's different is the SIM cards and the wavelengths. But if that doesn't happen, where we get these standards, these ability to do this mass production across the globe, what I'm also seeing as a risk is we could get to what I call robot rights, where you have multiple rule sets across the globe. At least two that I can think of would be just like we're doing with our high-end GPU chips that we've been doing for a while, and other things between very specifically China and the West. We could end up where there's a lack of trust and a lack of standards for having these robots from China come into the US or the Western world for fear of surveillance and Trojan horses and all that. So we've got to figure all this out. And if we don't, we could end up with two worlds of robotics and embodied AI. So let me pause there quickly. Are there any questions or clarifying points about this before we go much further? Making sense? Okay.
Yeah, it's a little too much information, so I think it's great.
All right. That is the risk here. Is this is so vast. Trying to cover it all and not dumb it down is the challenge. Okay. Any progress on getting a proper slide view up? No.
No, it's probably not going to work just with the video.
Okay. We'll do it the poor man's way here. So here's a couple of current developments I'm seeing. I'm almost done, and I'll turn it over to you, Adrian. But the current developments I'm seeing around humanoids, and that's an area I very specifically look at. With the humanoids, last year, these three things happened in a big way. First was the vision language action capability. A company called Helix put a model out where, for the first time at scale, without a huge investment, they were able to reproduce in their robots, their autonomous humanoid robots, the ability to see something happen and have enough awareness about their own structure, what they were, how they could hold things, what they could hold, how much weight they could lift, what they could pour, that they could watch a video or watch a human or watch another robot do something, and then they could do it, something they'd never been trained on. But just because they have, I'll call it a self-awareness, they are aware of who they are, what they are, and what they can do, and they see something happen. And if they once they do that, then that can also be passed along via the cloud in the background, so that every other robot that's running the same operating system is going to have that same training. So just like Neo in the Matrix learned jujitsu in about 10 seconds with an implant, once these robots learn, it's shared everywhere, and they now have this capability. So that's really been an advancement that's happening across the multiple manufacturers. Another thing, just for grins, is human-like skin. While we don't have to have all these robots look like real humans, and to some degree, we want to be able to distinguish between them and real humans, for the most part, just for trust and awareness that, oh, it's a robot, so I may need to behave differently in the presence of a robot than in the presence of a person. Uh, the human-like skin is really advanced. There's a company in Japan that has the skin with like pores in it that from a comfortable distance where you would be having conversation, the skin looks just like human skin, and they actually can produce a temperature of 98.6 degrees. Then finally, this is a really dumb looking robot, PAL, but the company that makes PAL has developed a pretty good deep dive on the ability to understand context and to adapt to its surroundings. So once that is is put in a box, let's say, and that capability, that mimicking human behavior of empathy and understanding is codified a step further and put into, say, a human-like looking robot that has dexterity like a human, you start to get more close to Westworld, and that's again this convergence of robotics and AI are bringing some of this about. All right, so finally, couple of key points. Here are the drivers I'm seeing from all my research, looking at all these scenarios, looking at all these scanning hits. I'm seeing that a big driver is aging population. That means people are in their jobs longer, and it also means that people are in old age longer. And ideally, that old age is better than it ever was before, but it's still old age. When I advance a few more years, I won't be able to do what I do today, and I'm going to need care for some of that, or I'm going to just be in a state where I'm not the 25-year-old I once was for a very long time, because we're living longer, living healthier, living better. So all that plays into an awful lot of things, including the workforce, which we'll get to. I mentioned the convergence of AI and robotics. That's big. It's causing a lot of these advances. Another big driver is when and how we get regulations and standards and legal things sorted out. Right now, most of it is piggybacking on internet and digital laws and digital standards. But once you get into the physical side of it, there are things we have to sort out, and Adrian has a good example of that later. Finally, last couple points, social acceptance is based on ethics and trust, and there's a lot of mistrust right now, and for good reason. So that's got to be sorted out. As that's sorted out, that will also drive the speed with which we see these things happen. Urbanization gives us positives and negatives. For one, in an urban environment, you have an awful lot of things that are consistent. The streets, the sidewalks, the city grid, traffic lights, signage, and it makes it a whole lot easier for a robot of any kind to navigate its way through the city, to know where it is, and to be able to control things. The negative coming there, though, is with all those controls, you have less freedom of movement, and so that's another con to the urbanization piece that will be sorted out. And finally, all these things really, but especially the aging population, are all bringing about these economic restructuring and workforce impacts, not only because the hyperscalers are just taking over more and more of what happens and how it happens, but the aging workforce, the changes in workers, the entrance of AI in the workplace is all bringing about a lot of economic restructuring and workforce impacts that are going to happen over the days and weeks ahead. So finally, for me, the implications and primary options that we would look at is first, I think the humanoid robots are likely going to arrive and be everywhere before we're really ready for them. Just like Waymo, just like the Tesla Auto Assist, as soon as something bad happens, we're going to hear about it, and it's going to be, that's the devil, that shouldn't have happened. But it is going to happen before it feels like we're ready for it. And when I say we, I mean everybody, and I mean everywhere and everything, both sociologically, ethically, trust-wise, government, business. All those things are going to be upset by the humanoid's arrival. It'll likely be before we're really ready for it. The next thing I would point out is I believe there's a high risk of an accelerated digital divide where you'll have haves and have-nots with robots. just like it was in the early days of automobile. Did you have a car or not? Okay, well, in the early days of the mobile phone, did you have one or not? And then it was, do you have a smartphone or not? The same kind of thing is going to happen with all this embodied AI. And there'll be a backlash of people who say, I don't want it. So it's a slightly different dynamic. Labor shifts, we talked about. People really are going to have to move up the value chain. Instead of, if you think about pure labor as we thought about it for the previous century, you get people in hourly work, selling their time and their physical presence to do things for a wage. And that work did require a certain amount of education. It did require a certain amount of training and skill. But what is likely to happen is that education, training, and skill is going to shift from either high school or college graduation and a degree to being certified to know this very specific, very narrow thing I do. And that thing you do is probably going to relate to data or the physical embodied AI devices. I think that's going to, as the physical devices that are embodied AI replace human labor is going to have to shift to managing those devices. And that is a physical activity just like any other. It's just you're managing robots instead of managing fenders that are going on this assembly line. And again, societal, cultural changes and trust. I think also mistrust is going to be ever present. So these are some of the things that I'm looking at in my studies, and I'm trying to do academic studies using foresight to understand how and when embodied AI is going to impact our society and what we can do about it. I'm looking at possibilities, I'm looking at plausibilities, but I'm also looking at what's a preferable future that we'd like to walk into, and to try and promote those when I can do that. That's a big reason why I'm here, why I'm focused on this in my work. I'll pause again. Any quick clarifying questions on what is embodied AI and the humanoid robots in particular?
Gordon, I'd like to make a quick comment if I can. I
Please.
think you're right on when you talk about societal changes and trust and all of that. I recently remember watching a newsreel where they were talking about a race where the robots, humanoid-looking robots, beat humans in I don't know, 100-yard race or something.
Yeah.
And everybody seemed like they were freaked out about this. And in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there going, cars do that every day. Just because they look like humans, they're still cars.
Yeah.
But I think the shape of the machine changes our perception of it.
Yeah, it in some ways it's settling if they look more like a person, and in other ways it's unsettling the more they look like a person. So we've got to fight that battle. And just like, we came out in the early days of AI and said, you should declare this was done using AI, and there should be watermarks and all those things, right? We did that very consciously. We're going to need to do the same thing for AI. For embodied AI, you need to know this is not a real person. Now, in the movie Westworld, they said the way to figure it out is just look at their hands. They weren't very good at making hands that look like human hands, and the skin and the wrinkles on the knuckles. Well, I think what we're going to see is they're already figuring that out, but we're going to need a telltale sign that this is really not a human. And right now, most of them are clunky and they move like robots still, but that's even getting better. There was the one robot that walked across a runway and had a fabric covering on it, and people thought it was a person in a suit because the walk was that good. So the CEO went out the next day and he had it come out again, and he took scissors and cut the cloth off so people could see that, at least that leg was artificial. If there was a person in there, that was it wasn't. But, I was thinking he didn't go far enough. He should have, taken the whole suit off. But at any rate, yeah, that's a big deal. Other thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, Gordon, I like how you're kind of going into like this thought and how the pushback of it, and like how society might and very well will probably handle it. But I am curious, like as the pendulum swings, you know, and people get the initial shock of this type of, you know, technical, you know, interest in advance. Do you think that like we're going to see like maybe I don't even know if in the United States or not, but potentially like other countries where you've got a certain amount of people being displaced, you know, from one profession to another or something like that because of the rise of this, and then you see like local governments or certain governments like pushing back on it before they get to the point where they have to compete again and bring it back and things like that.
Oh yeah, I definitely think labor is going to push back on a lot of this, and I liken it to the telephone operators, right? When telephony switched to pick up the phone and there's a rotary dial on it, and you could just dial. I could dial John's phone number and connect with him, you know, unless one of us was on a party line and it wasn't available. But I mean, I was self-serve. Everybody said, well, you can't do that. We're going to put all the operators out of work. What'll they do? Well, roll forward 20 years, and there were, instead of hundreds of thousands of telephone operators across the country, there were millions of people in the telephony business, and they had better jobs than just talking to people and punching cords into a wall. So I think the same thing's likely to happen, but people will overreact and underreact to the labor shifts that this is going to bring up. The good news is, I think we have thought leaders who are thinking about these things and advising us of the pros and cons, and people can take their positions and they'll be educated positions. The risk, though, is that it comes before we actually have done all that. If nothing else, real quick, I want to move over to Adrian. I'll pull up your slides and we can talk built and manufacturing.
Awesome. Wait a second for the screen to switch over.
It is not a video call. If somebody doesn't say, "Can you hear me now?" and make a commercial for Verizon.
Yeah. Are you guys seeing the built environment with the 5 circles?
No.
You might have to share your screen again and
Oh, okay.
share again.
Yeah, I'll unshare and reshare.
And so I'll kind of get started real quick. So I'm talking about the built environment. I'm mainly focusing on, as you see, the city planning, architecture, engineering, construction, and city management. And what I look at it as is just a life cycle of building, tearing down, managing, and then restarting over again. And that's just a continuous cycle. And it could be a 20-year cycle. It could be a 150-year cycle. And basically with all of this, it's just like a system of systems, really. It's just, and it has impacts into like zoning, code, politics, economics, real estate. And then those all impact zoning, code, politics, economics. Like it's just the recurring cycle. And if we go to the next slide. So going into the embodied AI stuff, it's with the physical labor projections being at, I mean, we have 350,000 people, like laborers, that are needed in the US that we just don't have. And with every 5 people leaving, trained people leaving, we have 1 apprentice coming in. And that really is just a driver for AI needs in the physical environment, for anything from landscaping to buildings and infrastructure, like city infrastructure. And so with that, a big point on the city management side, you have 56% of local city governments are starting to use AI. In the smart city market, which I hate the smart city term, but it's projected to go from 54 billion to about 268 billion. And that's just exactly because of these types of issues with the labor shortages and no proper process, because when designing things and planning cities, there's no trickle down of how is this going to impact the next thing, and how is this going to impact the other system that's using it. It's just, okay, we're going to build and then we'll figure out how to manage it. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is kind of how I look at what the 3 levels of AI are, or 4 really, is your discipline specific within that AEC, city management and planning, your interdisciplinary, and then your physical AI. And those all feed into like a larger system level AI, which is like digital twins, management, and even city operating systems, which every city has the same base things, but every city builds differently in some sense. Some build way more different than others and have way different code compliance structures than others. So being able to use AI to understand, and that's a big point in the failure of smart city things, is there's so much difference that it just costs way too much to even implement it on a per city basis. So going to a larger scale will become much easier with AI. Much harder, but much easier at the same time. And so when I'm talking about this discipline specific, that's things like your generative designs of buildings, your generative designs of like your actual models. And then with interdisciplinary AI, that's more so one-to-one AIs, like between softwares. And this is where things start to get complicated, is architecture, engineers, construction, they all use similar software, some of the same, but they have to go between each other and work together. And an AI that's able to basically cross function between the systems, figure out, is this 3D model code compliant with that area in the city? That's where you start to get that interdisciplinary AI. And with the physical AI, it's not as simple as just like a robot saying, oh, like self-driving cars are a great example. You have the roads, but it has to see kind of like what the stop signs are. And there's a bunch of different types of stop signs throughout the world. And I mean, they're starting to standardize them more so. But with this, like the problem with the physical AI in the built environment, and where there's a lot of opportunity, is there's not a lot of standards and stuff set in place with these softwares, because they all have different data formats and all of this. And this kind of feeds into the next slide, but they all just have different data formats, which is critical for the AI to read each other. And if they're not able to read each other, the outputs are just going to be wrong, flat out. And so that's where the people will still have a play, in my perspective, in figuring out, okay, where might have things gone wrong in these systems. And there's thousands of systems that they have to read between the lines and figure out the right data formats to use amongst each other, amongst like things like Autodesk, Trimble, GIS. I mean, there's hundreds of different softwares that it has to read before it can actually get to the physical AI. And the system level AI can go from a business scale to like a citywide scale, building scale, where they're creating more basically standardized processes. You can have a box that is, because like say for HVAC, someone will just tear into a wall and figure out where the problem is. But now you have IoT devices starting to read things. A robot can start to go into a wall precisely. So we're starting to get very more managed construction. So building so a robot can do things easily. Because if not, it's just going to be a free for all if you don't have these IoT devices, and that's kind of the most important thing. And that's also a big reason why these smart city type things fail, is because people don't like being tracked. So there's big opportunity and risk where for the IoT devices, like how much is it actually tracking the human activity on a personal scale, and then on a macro scale, like what are the people, it's always tracking what are the people doing, where are they moving. And so people get worried about that. And there's been, I mean, Google is working on a project in Toronto where it completely just, I mean, they spent billions of dollars and it just failed because the people thought they were being watched all the time. So if we can go to the next slide.
But privacy is a big issue, especially if we are changing civil codes to allow robotics to go into our walls, to go in and fix things in the walls. If the code itself will have to change for one, but then there is always the risk of what's watching me. You know, I don't know if you guys remember.
Eagle Eye.
I don't. Well, what's the name of the movie? Minority Report with. You know, some people think of it as, oh, that's a model that we could use in the future, and you know, but that movie was, I think, in a sense, was a way to tell people this isn't what you want to do, as opposed to having it be the model for the future. But I agree, that makes sense.
And yeah, I was actually going to bring up the movie Eagle Eye, and there's a show called Person of Interest, where basically it just tracks everything and basically makes a profile of you, which companies already have, let's be real. But when you start to get into that on a deeper scale, rather than just, oh, what is this person like? You know, what more so do they visit? It starts to become a little, people get suspicious, we'll say. And so there's definitely been failures, but I think what's going to happen with that is just people are like cities and organizations like ourselves, like AIFA, will start to create standards that say, for these certain types of technologies in this environment, here's your limits. Like, here's where the limit should be. Because in different environments, these technologies might have higher, like in manufacturing, who cares what the vision language action model can do if it's just fixing parts. But if it's fixing parts and watching you, there's a new thing where the Wi-Fi can look through the walls and it actually makes a picture of you and it starts seeing what you're doing. And so stuff like that is, you know, in certain environments, I think things are going to have to change. But we can go to the next slide.
Adrian, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to do a time check. We've got like 6 minutes and 7 slides, so it's not fair to you, but our trouble's getting the slides going as back to center corner here.
Yeah, I'm almost done with my stuff. But
Okay.
we want to go to the next one.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
So I purposely left this, like these images are kind of blind, but this just shows, this is soft. This isn't even the AIs on the right side. This is the softwares that are being used just in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And I mean, there's so many more operation softwares and stuff like that where AI, and that's the problem with the data formats is how's it going to like figure out and who's responsible when things go wrong, and there's that trickle down effect of, oh, a change was made in the architecture plan and it completely changed something in the construction plan, which now is impacting the robot. So, and there's on the left side, it's just stating how many different systems there are. And you know, you can just imagine how to go about that problem millions of ways. And we can go to the next slide. And this showing like the products again, vision language action model, for example, like what I was saying. I focus more on the IoT connected networks and agent-based modeling, stuff like that is where my interests lie. But putting all of these into a system to create programs or building programs on top of the software is what's happening. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity and there's more coming. I mean, that's just a few of them. So we can go to the next one. And safety, like we talked about, who's responsible for what? You know, is the car, as things get better, as more self-driving cars come, you know, I want to be having a little tea with my friends on a round table, looking back at the driver's seat in the future. Like that doesn't seem far off. But who's responsible when the AI makes a mistake? And there's that perfect example. I'm sure some of you have seen it where a guy fell into a street. The car in a split second made the choice to crash into the other car. So, but what if there's a glitch in the system because, you know, the car crashed into someone else now or into a different car and it killed someone? Was it going to decide in the future? Well, we'll just run over the human now. Like there's these things where it's constantly being trained, but is it going to start questioning itself? All these things where now that in construction that leads into safety issues. And then cybersecurity is a huge one. Columbus, Cleveland, we were hacked, a couple years ago? So now with all these systems getting more interconnected and breaking those data silos, is that going to be a bigger issue? So there's all these things to think about and question, but we can go to the next slide and we'll start talking about manufacturing. And this is talking about Hyundai and their plants. And these are from Scott Brown, by the way. So these are not mine, but talking about like Hyundai's plants and how they're already using just robot, like 1.7 million people you see on the next slide have been taken out of work because of these robots. And the industry is just going, it's very systematic because these manufacturing plants are very process to process. They have set standards, have set processes, which is easier for an AI to read, and they have slower changes than a city, for example, or a house where things are changing every day. So it's a lot easier for an AI to build. And the biggest issue in these types of things is unemployment. Like millions of people are going to be out of jobs. So what do you do when your community and your work is basically stripped of you? And there's the policy responses, which are just proven not to work, just from what the data shows. And so if like robots, the big question here is if robots can do most of what the humans are doing there, what organizing principle replaces work? Because the organization of how we act and how we do things and that community sense in your work is kind of what drives people to keep going to work. So we can go to the final one. And I know we're at the end, but it's not happening like slowly. We got to figure things out. So if anyone has any questions or thinks of things that need to be built or not built, would love to talk.
Guys, I want to thank you for doing this. I want to thank you for being here. We're hitting our time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And I thank you for joining us at AIFA educational session today. I look forward to seeing you guys in our July educational session. I also would like to make sure to extend the invitation to everybody to our July happy hour on July 15th here at our offices in Hilliard, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you don't have that on your calendar, please check it and join us. We would love to have you. That way we're not seeing everybody in the little square on a screen all the time. And we can actually stand up next to each other and shake hands. I thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Adrian, for doing this. This was very insightful, and I'm sure we're going to have more and more conversations about this.
Yeah.
It was a great presentation, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian and
Thanks for being
Gordon.
here.
Yeah.